Perfect. How is everyone today?
Doing great. How are you?
Mm. I, I'm doing great today. I had one. I'm seeing my girl Love, who I haven't seen since before her name's Katie, since before
Ah,
place. So it's a big day. Um,
Yeah.
we had one of those weekends. I spent the entire weekend cleaning, and it feels so good. Like
Yeah.
you know that like big spring clean feeling?
Yes,
Yeah,
it does feel good.
yeah. I'm drunk on that. How about you guys?
doing well, saw family and my nieces and nephew, so I was happy to see that this weekend.
Mm,
So it's cute.
that's great. Yeah, we visited with people online and took a really long walk outside yesterday and got some things done around the house and watched a really funny movie, Meet the Parents, which I haven't seen in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I know that one.
I went to the
The
beach
cat.
yesterday.
That's is that the cat flushing
Yeah,
the? Yeah, 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 that one with Robert De
yes,
Niro. Yeah,
yes.
amazing. So cool. Well,
Good morning, everyone.
what we want to do today, I think Laura's joining us. I know she needed a rest after last week's intensity, um, but she's been giving great feedback through the weekend and just kind
I think he just stopped.
of.
Yeah,
The video wasn't really coming through.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully
Uh,
they'll connect.
Hi, Serena.
Hi. Hi, how are
Think
you?
good. We're doing great.
It
Bless you.
Bless you.
was a beautiful Mother's Day weekend.
Oh, it's
Sorry, our Wi-Fi switched over or something. Apologies. Can everyone hear us?
yes.
Great.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we've been getting lots and lots of feedback, and would really love this session to be a space for you to like bring the codes that you're holding to the game. We really want to invite that everybody feels that we're co-creating this game together based on this kind of hypothesis we've got, which is that a game is one of the kind of most uh, one of the best bets we can collectively do right now around how do we organize the communities on to be part of the same mission, this kind of planetary mission, and this transition point we're on right now. If we can design a game that would enroll as many people interested in regenerative transition as possible, that could be one of the ways that we organize this like planetary decentralized movement around system change. And so that I know one thing about that game is the only way it's going to get created is through collective intelligence and like collective action. And so this is kind of both an invitation of how would you like to continue the projects that were raised with the 8 uploads, and how could we as an organization of people trying to design and create this game structure, how could we best support you number one. And number two, are the aspects that you could bring into the game as suggestions that would build process, that would build for scalability, that would kind of make it even more engaging or sticky. You know, we've got a ton of ideas, and we were limited how many of them we could try on you guys as like inaugural game players. But we would love to create space to welcome your shaping of how this continues. And we decided, you probably saw my email, we decided to delay a week so that we have time to build more process, speak to funders, do all the things that are like very before we kick off Food for Health next week. And we had 22 people join for Food for Health for dinner on Thursday, and today we finished and had an amazing conversation around funding, etc. And we saw numerous projects already emerge at the dinner. And so we know this can propagate, and we can take it kind of pillar by pillar of systems change, but would really love your involvement, invite very much your involvement as like founding sound players to continue this with us. So hopefully that sets the scene of the meeting today. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to build a movement here with people that are aligned by specific focus. And
Hey guys.
hey, Josh.
Hey.
And I think the invitation is to really hear from you, like what is alive for you about what you experienced last week, and what ways this project can be of service to where your life force is already moving in the world, and how we can find the synergies that await us when we're all supporting each other. And I think we're just holding like a desire to help create a container in which your natural genius, your natural gifts can emerge through, and that we can be united in a community around this, and all being mission aligned in the ways that we are, understanding the work in that context of a larger ecosystem that we're building out, starting with sound, and all of your amazing gifts was such a great way to kick it off. And so this is just like a feedback session, I think, for sourcing your insights, what was working, what wasn't, what ways you think we could improve or add on other aspects to the game. And yeah, and just come back together and support the rollout of what's emerging in this container.
How's breakfast, Dominic? Anything you want to add, Marnie?
Yeah, I would say it's not just feedback. Like, this is so important. You guys were the founding players, and that's a huge, I don't know, it's a real privilege, we hope. So whatever you're feeding back to us now is going to be like really absorbed and thought about deeply, because what we just experimented with was just that, an experiment, and we can tweak it however we like right now. And so hearing from you what you loved and what you didn't love, and what like annoyed you or what inspired you in a very honest way will be awesome.
Let's start with like, if you guys are open to it, like top 3 things that you loved about it, and then top 3 things that you'd love to see changed or improved. Would you guys be willing to just share that?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still dropping in with all those questions, and there's the question coming up in me of the whole next steps thing. Like, a lot of us are in different parts of the world, different parts of the state, and what is going to further into tangible projects or things that are opening up from what we all discussed and connected over. And that might still take some time outside of this container. I mean, I know it will, and we've all made connections to follow up on. I'm very new in the whole world of like finding funders and opening up connections to traditional organizations, even though I've put a lot of focus into that recently. And that's something I want to continue to open up, is this cross-cultural integration between the holistic side of things that we've been doing and the business as usual that's been happening. So I haven't exactly got like my perfect top 3 and things I'd like to change, but one bit of input I'd like to put in right now is I feel like there was and is so much energy around this, and I feel like some voices didn't get heard as much as I would have liked, and there could have been a little more moderated conversation somehow. So I feel like just with a little bit more invitation from certain people who are really staying quiet, there's also potential for even more like transcendental connection and opening of ideas. So I don't necessarily think that could have been done better for the first week, because there's just so much, but I see that as being something to really benefit the container moving forward in these games you guys are hosting.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Emil. Completely agree with you.
Yeah, that was definitely a shared lesson for all of us. And, we wanted to keep it really open and free and flowing. But post game, we were like, wow, we really need to dial some things in some more. So we're trying to find that happy medium, that good place to be where it's somewhat guided and everyone gets a voice, that people that might need a little bit more encouragement. Any ideas around how we could potentially facilitate that, with keeping it open, because it's these open exchanges and when people feel inspired to come forward, that's when you really create a lot of magic. So I felt I didn't want to box people in too much, like you have 2 minutes, now you have 2 minutes, now you have 2 minutes,
Yeah.
There's something that I've done that's worked really well in the past when I've done like different like collective prayer sessions with people. And I don't know how it could possibly translate to digital space, but here, let me show my video just so that you guys have me with you. Hey guys. But when I've done it before, it's been based on like an intuition hand, right? There's something that happens like with the hand, and then like it just feels right for the person to speak next. And what I would suggest is, aside from everybody having their faces in the screen so that we could have some way of reading a person, but like letting that be the piece with some buffers on the sides of it of like, this is what's going to happen, right? And this is the cue to when we're ready to move to the next person based on like an organic flow, and go deeper into that intuitive yin space.
I felt actually as we were going into that we could develop almost like a Gestalt Quaker like AA culture in the game kind of thing. Like there was definitely a feeling that something could emerge here from a cultural perspective that was like new and interesting, and like trusting in the collective intelligence. And I'm feeling very much that there's a seed here. When your prayers like see the green shoots, and it's very tangible, but it's like a delicate green shoot. But I'm seeing that here among us all, and the invitation is if we see like how we're relating to what's being co-created here as like the first of what can hopefully be many rounds of like improvement cycles. The key for us is that these first like early experiments are as like slam dunk, hit the ball for the sidelines, successful as possible. So we're really like keen to work kind of like in the trenches in terms of what's going to make this work, what's going to make this community kind of flywheel of like value creation in a way that isn't like extractive for you as contributors, but is like abundant. It's like a value engine. Mm-hmm. If we can design that together, like that could change the world right now. from a, you know, putting communities back in their place. So would really take this feedback on, and like how we create a culture is going to be so important. Like, what is the culture of playing the game? Because we already kind of laid out a pretty like awesome framework based on some like ancient wisdom of like balance between yin and yang, and like being and becoming, kind of in going in versus taking action. So you know, things as you, this isn't just today, but as you're thinking through the week, things that you think could be like important cultural layers to establish that, we really welcome them.
The other thing that I kind of felt is that we had those different uploads or 8 ones to go to, and I know that the breadth of knowledge that is available for other people in the other parts of the game. And if we look at, like, you know, if I was looking at like genealogy and all the other areas, if like, oh, I'm in this area, but then my background in healthcare, insurance, carrier side of like integration and systems that are already available to bring this in, I'm like, we didn't have enough time for those. So it's like there's this bigger group that is, you know, it's like we all have multi-disciplines that we can pull from for this.
Yeah.
And so it's like we just got kind of like an appetizer of like the true dinner that we're trying to create.
Mm-hmm. Well, Andrea, this is a beautiful point that we've been discussing, which is if this was like a taster, but we actually were to, for those that wanted to continue, design something that might look like a 12-week program, something in those, you know, and that it would be led by like individuals, like, for example, Andrea, you could lead with Leo the Matrix projects, the Common Language Project Omaha, and like then it would be, okay, how would we be able to support you continuing that? And the goal would be within the 12 weeks that we would present to an audience of like all of the biggest foundations, or like who are the aligned people that would be useful to present for that. Like that's part of what we're thinking about, is like, what is an accelerated accelerator look like?
Yeah, totally true. I just know that there's so much information that all of us have, of like being able to give it like little tidbits to the other, be like, oh, this is what I've seen working here. Because because it's like we all have our disciplines that are amazing, but it's like there's like this open, it's almost like the open source of like, okay, here's other options to look at and vet to say yes or no to, or is this now or is this later? So just that was the only feedback I really have on it. Otherwise, I thought it was an amazing.
So you saying if we, because there's so much expertise in the room, like more cross-pollination of people.
Yeah, more like it's like bees going around to the different flowers and like pollinating them and saying like, oh, well, I've worked in behavior and healthcare, so I understand the disease states of like 1,000 or 2,000 different disciplines. So then someone else that understands frequency, I could talk to them and be like, oh, this frequency would go with this disease state. So it's just those like little things that we didn't have a lot of time to, I mean, now it's like you have time to.
Would you be able to, Andrea, like brainstorm ways, because I love the metaphor of the bee with the pollen. And we kind of create a garden of 8 flowers, and for a certain time period, maybe we just flip. Each person goes round. You know, we've got to figure out a way that we could do this within the time frame. But that's a really kind of great application of collective intelligence. Like, what might that look like if we tried to get 22 people pollinate around 8 different projects?
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to do that, but
you don't need to know, like, how would
whoever's better at doing systems and collective would probably.
Yeah, or maybe this is an invitation for us all. Like, if it does that feel like, because I love the concept of it being able to apply our collective intelligence in that way. In the projects, the game of that week is like a garden. each project is like flowers, and we're like bees pollinating between those flowers and the garden is honor of the planetary commons.
Yeah.
It's kind of really nice metaphor for like what's going on.
But I'm not sure what, sorry, go ahead. After you, please.
Real quick, then I really like that concept of the flowers and the garden, the cross-pollination, and I also see that very beautifully within the context of a 12-week program, and I really like that idea. And maybe the first 2 or 3, maybe 4, that might be a lot, first couple weeks is about more the cross-pollination element, and then people more settle in to their groups to grow, and they have that information from the other groups, and they could still communicate. But then after everyone's kind of shared around a bit, then the different focus groups come together for a 12-week expansion that then seeing something like that.
I have a couple ideas. I love that, Emil. Everybody has such great ideas. And I want to say to Lucian and Sarah, I mean, everybody did such a great, you did so fabulous with welcoming everyone in and inviting them. I think for myself, I may have not piped in as much as others because there are people that are specialists in sound. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit there, but I don't know.
Am I there? Oh, can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
What was the last thing you heard? What was the last thing you heard?
Specialists.
I think we heard it all. Specialist, yeah.
Okay, and so I know that I have some value to bring, and at the same time, I'm respecting the ideas and opinions of people that have so much more information that's really important to get out there and share. So, you know, I'm really supportive of what you're saying is getting everybody to equally on some level be able to share. What I did for myself is I love the shared document. So I would go in there because I like to think about things and how does it fit in and see if it's already being done or if it's worth mentioning, you know, that kind of thing. And then I added it to the document. So it seems as though people's voice can be added, or if they have thoughts afterwards. Did a lot of people do that? Did they add to the shared document? Do you know?
Yeah.
Any of you?
We did have good
You
participation.
did? Okay, good. And yeah, I totally see this cross-pollination idea of having a structure where you have the 8 different groups and they're able to say, well, these are the 3 groups or 5 groups or 2 groups that I want to be a part of, and then systematically put together, or they can do it on their own, like email each person or connect with the ones in that group and set up a time. It could be separate from what you're doing right here and now, and they could have some of their own motivation to go ahead and have those conversations. Because it's one thing to have a bunch of ideas on your own, and it's another thing to talk to and brainstorm together, which always creates something much more powerful.
Totally.
But it's like,
Oh, sorry, Don.
we'll have to search.
Go ahead.
Yeah, here's just another, well, first of all, I just want to say, I just think this is such an exciting template and model. And I feel like having the 8 of you being a kind of a core nucleus of it is really beautiful, and that you're all there in quarantine and this is kind of birthing out of that is just really incredible. And I already have people in Austin who want to like do an iteration. So I think it's really important, this kind of reflection. And I even think that it's worth kind of playing with longer than just an hour to kind of, you know, I think I kind of threw out the idea of having a game around the game, because we're talking about kind of a whole new way of
Game around the game. Game. Let's do it. Anybody
yeah, a game
like
around
to do that? Yeah.
The gaming on the game, because you could bring in like some people who are working on these kinds of things. Also, the whole idea of life cycle of emergence and how you take social innovations to scale. That's really what we're talking about with this like movement. The other kind of thing that I would say, just specific feedback, is around that a little bit more time building the relational field in the yin section, a lot with each person, different people's offerings of dropping us in with sound, which took a lot of time in some ways, which was super awesome. I mean, we could just do that showcasing, but in some ways we didn't weave the relational fabric, like kind of enough to then allow people, like what Dawn was saying, that would maybe have more courage to kind of like speak up and know that everybody has a unique voice in the whole mix. And maybe even do some like little breakouts where people have, like you do the deeper kind of opening space with the sound in this instance, and then dyads or triads, and allowing people to kind of presence themselves fully, because a lot of people didn't really get to presence themselves fully. And maybe do like 2 rounds of that. You can do some of those things like speed dating. You can make some real progress in that. And then building on what Andrea was saying about synergy, and I love synergy, and I love synergistic weaving, and there's a process, and I don't know how it would translate, but I'm sure we can figure it out, is World Cafe, where basically you've got a question, you're an inquiry around, and there's all these different tables, like these different groups, and then there is this cross-pollination that happens as people move, but there's someone who's holding the anchor in the field. And it could be a kind of a version of that with like one bumblebee or a couple people, because I know I wanted to be in a couple different groups. So I was thinking even that one first round of what we kind of did, and then going back in, and it really requires a little bit more time to lend that the bees and the pollinators being able to do their thing. So those are, a few this is the kind of stuff I geek out on and think about pretty much like all the time for like a long time.
Love it. So game on for the game.
Yes, because the game, it's conscious evolution. It's self-reflection. We evolve faster and we can refine, and we don't have to iterate for like months. We can like quickly accelerate a template, and the template is good, and the template can be great, and it can then, when it's great, it can scale. And because you guys are so in your little octet, you're like juicing up your little octet. You're like the core of the fractal, which is, it's the perfect starting point. And then you do have to create spaces for others to co-create as you spiral out, right? Which I hear is your invitation. Now I'll stop.
Oh no, Sherry, this is beautiful. So yes, in terms of this week, would love that. And we can just make this, it's obviously like co-creation for anybody that would like to participate. Maybe each day we could theme them around a particular question area that we've got. For example, remuneration should be a day, structuring the game should be a day, and we'll share what our thinking is so far, and just be able to get feedback and spiral around that for anybody that would like to participate. And then, as you were saying about the yin, we cut short our yin time last week. And we did it because we were a little nervous about asking for full 8 hours of people's time, given most had done 2 hours for dinner. I think our learning here is, and everybody feel free to agree, disagree with this point, is if we do from 11 till 1 every day and spend a full hour, maybe 30 minutes of that hour is like offerings to the whole group. And then 15 minutes, 2 times 15 minutes, we split into groups of 3, randomly allocated. And so within the 4 days, you would have been split into 8 groups of 3. And that should make sure that everybody's been in a group with someone and you would have been in maybe a group two with the same person. But it would be a really good way of us deeply connecting in triads that could create all sorts of magic.
Yeah, the format that I don't know if you did it that last week or not, but is the seed sprout blossom harvest format. It just works so well, right? Whatever happens at the beginning becomes the lead conversation that then when you break out into groups creates the sprout. And then when you guys come back together, you share the blossoms. And then at the end of the week is the grand harvest, where all the blossoms basically get captured and then created into the grand harvest. And that was kind of what we were looking at. But yeah.
This is, Rachel, love a specific project to think about, like how we could bring this concept fully into the game of seed sprout blossom harvest, including like the blossom stage. We have different archetypes that we introduce to the game. For example, like you are a flower archetype or you are a bee archetype. And we kind of introduce those new languages into the game, whereas like you're actually playing a specific role for the flourishing of this garden. Could be a really good way of like incorporating what Dawn was saying with the cross-pollination. So thank you.
I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents. Sorry, I'm just waking up. I had a long night last night. I think when we take a look at the 8 topics that we were all discussing, what I want to say about it is not that any particular topic has a level of priority or importance over another, because they all play into each other. Though I think when it comes to bringing this to the forefront, where we can actually bring this to full application and then moving into a realm of funding. I think if we take a look at the topics and figure out from a practical use of like, okay, sound reverence versus soundscaping to like all these things, which application in terms of all of the collective intelligence that is going on within the 22 people, or if more people get added to it down the line of more expertise comes and all this kind of stuff, being able to properly direct the energy where certain aspects of it have the ability to ground deeper into the field so as to be able to propagate the energy, while the other topics help support in the ability to move the pieces a little bit faster or create more tangibility in whether it's the science, whether it's in the connection, whether it's in the community, whether it's in the intelligence of more research or more understanding or more homogeny between how practitioners are coming together and establishing the core values or the core vocabulary of what we're using in all of these pieces. I think the bigger challenge amongst the whole group is, how do we actually bring all of this to a pragmatic and practical approach to be able to explain this to VC firms, to fund, to investors, or even conscious people who are like, oh yeah, totally, I'll throw money at this and like, we can totally make this thing happen. And the reason why I bring all this up is because, a lot of the topics that we've been talking about were a lot of the inner addressings that I had to go through when I was going through the startup seed program. And so it was like interesting, kind of seeing this meta process of this group coming together and then being like, wow, this is like my own internal process of like literally all of these voices coming together and being like different aspects of my personality talking about everything. And I was just like, like, I wonder, how we can kind of like just better wrap all of the strings together so that it can become a very strong rope that then allows us to kind of whip things into shape and bring things closer to us the faster that we want to implement it. And so I think, one, as facilitators, of this experience. You know, we do have all of our collective expertise, and then as you all, as the kind of facilitation of guiding the process, I think being able to create the fundamental loops that allow us to kind of keep cross-pollinating, not only from just like a kind of meta etheric process of just like being able to congeal all of our ideas together, but then being able to really ground the process itself of like, okay, cool, like which particular topics can really actually bring full implementation, either, you know, dependent on the dictation of how quickly we want to actually be able to bring this, because it's, you know, like on a scale of a timeline in terms of storyboarding and all this kind of stuff, obviously some pieces are gonna play more pivotal roles than others over the course of actually bringing tangible light to, if we want to create a center, if we want to create products, if we want to do more scientific research, you know, because, you know, they all have their own timelines of how quickly they can come together. So that's kind of my, because then through the cross-pollination process, you know, everybody's contributions can see more tangible results, maybe not necessarily a lot faster, but more so the contributions can really congeal a lot more.
I certainly agree with you, Shane. I think that's a very wise reflection here. And, you know, I wonder, from a structuring perspective, one thing we've been thinking, you know, the tagline for the game has been community solutions to planetary challenges. And we thought this weekend that maybe if we were even more focused on what the intent of the game is, and reframe that as community solutions for the planetary commons, and that we were very specific with the game initially, and would love your feedback on this, but I think there's a whole lot of people out there that would rather see their innovation that they're holding, their dream that they're holding, turn into something of mass propagation for as many people as possible, rather than trying to create a successful business per se. And one thesis we've got is that there's a lot of people, if they could get financially remunerated really like well, for creating value in the commons, that would actually be a more and more common thing to do. And so this is one thing we're thinking about from a structure perspective, is like, maybe what we're doing is onboarding people into a game to create value, like to create essentially like a Commonwealth engine. And so we're thinking about what the relationship is with like IP and stuff like that, because if the game is essentially open source by design, and that what we bring through, what we invite in is open source, it changes the whole way we relate to processes and relate to like, you know, legal structuring, I guess, of like how we support the initiation of projects.
Can I say something? This is Serena. Yeah, so thank you for saying that. So first of all, I really want to commend you guys on a wonderful first week. It was really fun to be a part of. It personally touched me at a very, very deep level. And in the end, even though I didn't share during the actual week, and I, you know, did it, I'm not going to start my video, Lucian, because I've got, number one, I'm not dressed. I've got a housekeeper here and my partner sitting right next to me, so it's a lot. But but I will later. I apologize. I've got so many things going on right now. I was hoping the vacuum would stop for a few minutes. But I, you know, it cracked my heart open to hear some of the yin. So I wanted to share that, yes, I think more yin needs to happen. And from a detail-oriented perspective of the actual goal of getting your document done, maybe it was because you guys weren't, like, we were kind of creating what the document was going to be and what the expectations were during the game. But when we broke out in the breakout groups, I don't think there was enough clarification for what you guys wanted back from us. So even though I had an amazing time in the group and we did this really fun experiment and we learned a lot from our own intelligences together and how that felt, I wanted to be able to render what you guys needed to go to the next step. right? And I think there was maybe a 2-minute instruction period where you guys said something like, I'm looking for 140 characters. We're looking for a meme. Like you guys did say it, but like, it would have been awesome if you guys had a visible like example shown on the screen of maybe a different game or a different topic so that we could relate it to sound in whatever way. I think that would have been really beautiful. And then I noticed too that, you know, and I'm guilty of it too. Like I love to speak, and I definitely interjected when I had an idea. And maybe that there's something you guys can do on the back end with people who you guys are recognizing as more quiet, but clearly are there for the purpose and the reason and have a lot to share. And that would be to have someone on your team gently message them, like, how are you feeling about this during the process on WhatsApp or however, and just check in with them and be like, you know, we're here if you want to share anything. We'd love to hear you on the call, but please let us know. Lucian, I personally felt like I could message you with my idea at the end of the week because I've had the opportunity to be in Savannah House. I've had the opportunity to meet your daughter. I've had the opportunity to look at that beautiful painting. And that's how I remember meeting you, was through your mom and that commissioned painting you have in the living room. But had I not had those touch points with you, I don't know that I would have shared that idea at the end. And, you know, I'm just sharing that really made a difference in my trust to you. So if there's a way that you can build that with one of the wonderful team members who has the same consciousness as you do, that's why they're hired on your team, to kind of do that on the back end with people who you want to hear more from, I think that would work. And then yes, this idea around the planetary commons and open sourcing designs from people, me personally, I don't care if that idea, for me, it was a broken dream. Like I shared, I was going through a lot of pain personally, and I didn't get to execute on that idea. My idea was to get the best sound people, like in terms of Sony or Adobe, to put in the speakers to that system. That architecture firm was willing to price out all the material, and we were going to try to get that all funded and like really make it about maybe several companies being involved in that project. But I never got the theme. So for me, it was more important to share it with you because you have the theme and you guys moved so fast. I was so impressed with how quickly you guys were taking the information and regenerating it back to us, that I was like, hey, if anyone's going to be able to help me with this or do something, or even just collectively get people to understand the concept, it's this team right here. So I just want to say thank you so much for holding that space. And secondly, you guys all worked so hard during the week, and I could really feel that every single time. You guys, every night I got an email, every night there was consistency with what your asks were in terms of that. I just wish there was more clarity with what you needed from me so that I could participate more, if that makes sense. But your communication was flawless in terms of, you know, me feeling comfortable and me going, wow, they're really serious. So that's what I have to say.
Those are great takeaways. Thank you so much.
And also, I want to say one more thing. I really love the idea of like a 12-week like incubator program. I think that's great. And another thing is, like, as I think Sherry was saying, or it was somebody on the call just now was saying, that each of these could be a game within a game. Why not make them a game within the game and use each of those 8 concepts as a new regenerative dinner and get other players involved who are very interested in it as well, and see what comes up. And you don't just invite sound players, you invite, you know, you take one of those examples and you invite scientists, you invite, you know, people who can publish scientific journals on the call. So you invite all the other players who could actually make your idea come alive in that week. You invite the investors, whoever can make it, you know, maybe towards the end of it. So you actually have the whole game thought out with the panel, just like you did with I missed Friday, but that panel now becomes the effort of the next part of the game. So it doesn't end and the game just continues. And as you guys layer on, the end goal is actually the manifestation of the first concept, but you keep layering people and things that can make that come alive.
Yeah, in practicum, what I hear Serena saying is a digital host, like how when we did our event with Sari for Skull, like that's a really good execution point to remember. And then another piece is when you spin out into these 12 weeks, I think what should be shared with the group in the beginning is that if someone is interested in becoming a planetary ambassador, meaning they will be a host for the 12-week program, to let us know. And then what we can do is have a weekly call with all of our planetary ambassadors and teach them how to do the thing that we do and how to report back and how to, and what like the ROI agreements are on anything that comes through to keep it in like a high self-sufficient place.
Mm.
Playbook.
It's the playbook. Yeah.
Playbook.
Yeah. We're co-creating the playbook. This is the first. Yeah. Thank you for that, Rachel. And this structure, like of a 12-week, as this emerges, the thinking here is the game itself is an experiment in fractal theory. Like, it's like if reality is a game, that this is like a micro in that. And so the game on the game is like a beautiful fractal for us to think through, how do we do this accelerated accelerator for the accelerated accelerator kind of thing, because that's basically what's unfolding right now, I think. And we're living in unique times as well, where we recognize that one of the things that allows us really to propagate the game is the fact that everybody is at home and their schedules aren't normal and things like that. And so how we then adapt into immersive, location-based experiences for people to come together and play the game once things open up is also something we're thinking through.
Lucian, I've been on your website, and it seems as though that, and just hearing you talk at times, maybe I misunderstood. I was under the impression that there had been other topics, like what you did with health and sound, that you've also collaborated on and worked on. Or maybe you're starting with this and then you're going to next topics with different people.
So sound was the first game, like the first actual game where we tested this 8-hour journey. But we've been doing, since March, we've been doing kind of up game meetings where we've been exploring like ideas of this, and we've been hosting various dinners, most of them around food for systems change. So those were specific dinner portals where we'd apply collective intelligence over a 2-hour period. But this was the first time we actually went in and said, okay, 8 hours, let's run the first game. And to be honest, just in all transparency, at least 50% of what happened was made up in the week. A lot of it was like, we didn't know exactly how this should function. And so we were like real time making it up. And so that's like, some of that will be felt by you, and it's like the truth. But it's in the spirit of like, this isn't coming from us, it's coming through us, and we're recognizing what this is becoming through this field of collective intelligence, and like trying to avoid putting too much structure in place and letting like the process of emergence unfold into through the playing of the collective intelligence. So
it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Something else I'd love to add into that, when talking about the game as a fractal, it's like we're in this fractalization of building a movement. It's like, how is that going to actually look? And there are some principles and conditions around, how do you actually build a movement? But we're also doing it within a different context. And I think that in that playbook, it could be helpful to look at what does it take to be ready to play like the infinite game, so that people come in with a little bit front loaded in terms of, okay, I'm going to be stepping into a different kind of container, and I have the information about what the times are, but also what it's asking of us as individuals when we start to play with people in a new way, because we really are talking about a new game. So I worked with a guy from Global GIA, the Guild on Evolutionary Architects, and they have these ideas of like the infinite game ready players. So there's some nice memes in there that I think could be useful. And yeah, that's just on that little point there.
Hi. Thanks, Sherry. I have a question. So I was working on some other pieces for our team this week, so I didn't have as much time as I'd like to in this particular grouping. But I'm curious if, so at the beginning of the game, it was my understanding that we were coming together, yes, to explore sound healing, but to also put sound healing, like explore the possibility of putting sound healing in hospitals to affect the people with COVID and others, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that came to fruition, if at all, at the end of the week, and what were some learnings there. And because when I touched in throughout the week. What I ended up hearing in the short amount of time that I was with the group was how great healing sound was. And then like experiences of healing sound. So I'm curious, like what the arc came to be.
It's so Rachel, it's a great point, and actually it was we saw even after the dinner, the first dinner, the sound healing in hospitals was way too narrow. That was multiple feedbacks that came around the game, that it was like almost kind of us going into the game with a particular outcome that we were aiming for. And so we responded to that by kind of opening up and even making the inquiry just sound for health. And that, I think, actually created a lot more spaciousness for people to bring whatever it is that, because we didn't know what people were coming into the game with, you know. It's like we wanted, you know, in the spirit of the game being about maximizing the number of possibilities, so that gives us like real-time choice. What we found is that actually having a broad scope enabled us to like create the spaciousness for people to come, like Serena come with the sound portals, which actually is like, and so what we ended up finding was the sound in like hospices and hospitals and care centers, etc., was a subcategory of this broader topic, and actually that felt quite good to be able to make sure that nobody felt that they were being too restricted at the beginning of the game. And I hope, yeah.
Well, and I'll say that because it went broad, I lost interest. Like I was really excited about finding a way to help the people that are suffering right now.
Well,
and I get that it went for help, but like for us to like not at least try to see if we could do it. I don't know if it happened or not because I wasn't there, and I don't want to assume anything. But like the times that I tune in, I'm like, what are they talking about? I thought we were doing anything.
I would go back and like watch what happened, just so, because I think, yeah. So in terms of, because we did absolutely have a group focused on that, but I think the important thing here is that we were rapidly responding to the interests of the 22 people we had brought in, not the interests of the facilitators. And so that's a really key point, is like us as like, we're not the sound experts. And so we were listening and hopefully like responding real time to what was giving people pleasure about like what they wanted to bring in, rather than us saying, hey, here's a particular outcome that we want to see. I think that relationship's really important.
I think maybe in the next series that we do, when we do food for health, right? So it's food for health, but like the one line tag of what we do comes out of the dinner portal that then gets focused into the next, like if it was sound for health, you know, sound healing in hospitals or whatever the thing was, even if it was just like immersive exploration of what sound healing is, then we know kind of what the tag, the trim tab is for the week of our focus outside of the generalization of X for health. Might be a useful thing for us to look at, so we know, so people know what to expect when they come into the container to a degree of an emergent process.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Rachel, I've had feedback similarly about, especially in relation to, for example, the food one. And I wonder, do you think the breakout groups, it would get hyper specific, and that would be okay if we had, imagine if we just focused on the hospitals for that, or like on food, we go hyper targeted with that. Do you think, is your instinct that then the breakouts would just get really kind of confined, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, as free-spirited as I am,
Mm-hmm.
I thrive on discipline
Mm-hmm.
and boundaries and all of that, because it allows my imagination to shoot off like a rocket when I know, because I know as a creator I can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so like getting as specific as we can, and like for people to know, like for me, when I'm with people, I'm like, okay, consider me your fairy godmother. Like be very specific on what it is you want to ask me, because it will get done. Right? And so it's like getting too broad for me, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it goes into like us congratulating each other for being so awesome. And I'm not saying that that's what happened, but I'm saying that's what I know can happen in these type of experiences and my work as a facilitator. And so it's really important for us to remember like our inherent greatness, but also find out how to create a synthesis of our collective thinking into motivated, inspired action together, to where we like have something that's like a relic of our time that is like generative and for everyone else.
If I can jump in, because the Sound in Hospitals seed was one that Emile and I brought into this, and I have to say I am disappointed that we didn't really talk at all about that, because I think it's a very specific, actionable project that still needs to be done. But at the same time, I also resonate with what Lucian is saying, that the way what we were doing in bringing these people together was we were asking for collective intelligence, and we had to be responsive to what was bubbling up from the collective intelligence, which was a lot more than just Sound in Hospitals. And it seems to me like what needs to happen is, if you're going to bring together a group who haven't met and you want to call that collective intelligence, you want to go broad first, and then the idea of the 12 weeks is that then you pick some specific projects that you dig into more deeply, where you do that that focused brainstorming about how you actually execute things.
Yeah, and for the record, I love what happened. I'm not I'm not saying I didn't love what happened. I was really inspired by everything. I'm just curious, when we take it into the next space, what's going to be different.
Yeah, and I see Dom has been.
Thank you, Sarah. Clearly, I'm not that good on Zoom at interjecting. I don't know what it is, maybe a British thing.
Probably.
Still figuring that one out. I'm sit quietly on every call, but I have lots to say. So it's just, I don't know how that works, just to give some feedback on someone that wants to say a lot and doesn't know how to get that in. So still working on it. I'll let you know if I find a solution.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it was incredible what you have created here, because I have never been part of something like this, with this many amazing practitioners and people with such breadth of knowledge coming together in this kind of format, and to commit their time. You really gave us so much opportunity to join and created an energy and excitement about it. And I, for one, have loved being part of it, not knowing whether I could make it, if I can make it, make the time. So yeah, thank you for that, and I think it's really amazing. You pretty much opened up something huge that hasn't really been explored in this way before, so kudos for doing that. And yeah, it's going to be a process to figure out what to do with this, because it's now out there, the energy is created, we've all connected. One of the big things for me is really sort of the funding side. From a business background, I've always been looking at sound, how to do it differently, how to fund it, how to generate interest in those areas. And that's a challenge, of course. So I'm very interested to see and know more about how you'll approach that, how you can see putting it out there, existing connections you have, funders, everything like that. I think there's also quite a lot of voices that would be amazing to bring in at some point. There's a lot of people and other sound practitioners and people in this world that haven't been part of this. So a big question for me is how we extend this out more, and maybe that, this is the next step for what you've created with the document. So yeah, it'd be good to see that. And I think the other thing as well is the reality of everyone that's here, that what we've co-created is what we are able to commit to in terms of time and resources to move it forward. So I think that's a big question, like seeing who can actually do. I mean, for me, it was amazing to see the Bowls for Schools program on there. That lit me up, and that's something I could be part of to an extent, but I don't know how much time I could contribute moving forward. But would love to be something that sort of gets it going, or part of a group to just really start to work it in. So yeah, that's just my thoughts. But thank you. It's been amazing, and even having this little bonus time today was exciting.
Yeah, Don, thank you so much. Your voice was consistently just such a like beautiful, grounded, very applicable solutions that you are bringing. And so part of what we've been thinking is to continue actually having it time bound each week, where people know that they can continue to participate in projects and they can say, I'm going to be in this week and not in the next week, for example. And that actually having the game propagate the game. So giving you as a founding player the ability to take on a project and use the game as a way to refine that project feels like a good way of propagating this and bringing it to other sound healers. So we're thinking about that and thinking about digital tools that will enable us to connect through the week while we're playing the game, but then each one of those projects that want to have continuity become games in their own right, and have the tools to support that. So
cool.
We have Sarah. Thank you also for suggestions with the survey. Marnie's just created one and is going to share it with you before we share it with everyone.
Can I say a few things?
Please.
I'm Dancing David, not David Gibson. Dancing David, and to help out again because I know I wasn't around that much last week. So a couple of points. Awesome conversation, Rachel. I like what you said about discipline. Since I like to dance, it's like can be really free. And one of my dance teachers said, discipline is the key to freedom early on in my career. So that was helpful because I didn't really want to be disciplined about it. But so along the lines of being creative and emergent, I think that's great because I like freedom. And also I hear that a good way to move forward fast is to model what already exists. So when I think of what we're doing, I think of things like startup weekends that Techstars runs, or other kinds of incubators that do already have a lot of structure we could model to move those things forward if we wanted to. I also like the idea of freedom and being emergent. So it's just a matter of how much time it's going to take to get to where you want to go, it seems like. And then the last thing I'll say is, in terms of sound in hospitals or having time to do all these things and how it relates to the return for each of us in doing it, I'm really interested in, Lucian, if you have more insights about, I think you talk a little bit about value exchange and what's the new version of value exchange if it's not money, or is it money? Because fundamentally, I believe there's really big flaws in the monetary system, and that's why you don't see sound in hospitals today. There's perverse incentives, and I've been working in healthcare for the last 3 years, so I've been on the inside of that, and they do not choose the most cost-effective, best outcome care for you. That's not what happens in healthcare as much as they want to say it. So we either need a new healthcare system like David Gibson talks about, or a new monetary system that rewards things in a different way, or something like that. In my world, I think that's what we need, and would love to be a part of creating that if we can.
Yeah, David, thank you so much. I think part of the design of the game is it's at the smallest micro level. It's a new incentive design for a kind of cultural phenomenon, for a return to sovereignty to communities. And part of my prayer is that experimentation that we co-create together could actually be part of the seed fractal that can spread into redesigning every system. Because right now our whole system's rigged and for sale. It's like the whole design of incentives is like you're going to get the best money can buy because it's incentivized to propagate that way. And so we've got some really structural, fundamental aspects of capitalism that is like self-propagating, a self-destructive win-lose game. And so if there's a new game in town, which is win-win, and we're incentivizing gifting and service and honor and duty and all these things that like some pretty timeless values that society could do a lot of good from, like how do we bring that into an incentive piece? And this is something we've been thinking a lot about, and creating this in-game currency called stars, which is like essentially exchangeable for dollars. But there's a whole new set of rules around stars that, for example, 10% of all stars transactions go into the planetary commons, that there's a tie between the minimum amount of stars you can earn from playing the game and the maximum. All these kind of principles that we've been thinking of, they're actually like new economic design, but using a game format as a way to experiment them on the micro level. So this is the kind of thing I like, would very much, and I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to just do some kind of closing. If anybody needs to go, we just want to respect the hour that we're over now. But we would love to invite in, a big part of this is that we think it's imperative that people playing the game are financially remunerated for contributing to the commons, because we're living in a really perverse reality where somehow creating value for everyone for the common good isn't rewarded as much as creating value for the rich. And like that's a system that is only going to destruct and self collapse. And so we actually we need to go to big funders and say, look, we've got an experiment here around like some fundamental aspects of the way we design society and the kind of contribution of value that's getting rewarded. And there's a lot of people like talking about that, but not actually putting their money behind their words. And so those are the first people we're going to bring in and say, look, this is a real, very tangible way of experimenting with stakeholder capitalism, Mark Benioff. Or this is those kind of people, and say, look, we need funding here. We need 30K a week to fund through to contribute for players of the game. And so, add that up, and then each game then should raise 30K or something like that, so that this becomes truly a kind of like a planetary tenure. Playing the game is like you're accessing capital for your contribution to the game, but also there's a whole gifting piece there that we can get into another time. But just some final thoughts, and we're happy to stay longer, but just want to give spaciousness if anyone needs to go, to say au revoir.
I'll add another piece to this conversation, especially around the.
Could Shane, could we just, if anyone, just before you do, just give it one sec, just anyone needs to go, just we want to make sure we thank and say goodbye. We can stay on, but if anyone, just respecting the container.
I've got 5 minutes, but I'll just say bye now, but I have to go in about 5. Thank you.
Dawn, you need to go?
No, I was just saying goodbye to Rachel.
Okay.
There is something I want to say that's short after Shane, if I could.
Sure. Anyone else? Just want to make sure. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We really honor and appreciate it. Cool. Shane, thank you.
I think when a lot of what these discussions are revolving around, and especially because of the way we have so many multidisciplinary action-oriented projects of how this will apply to so many diverse fields. And I think this is where, for me, racking my head around this 7 months ago literally drove me mad, because I was just like, oh my God, there's just, a sound for wellness and sound for health is such a, it's such a diverse application, because there's so many realms of where this energy can move. And then the more I tried to wrap my head around it, the more it always kind of kept pointing back to the one thing and one thing only, at least in my field. I'm not going to say this of everybody else. Money.
Mm-hmm.
Money. And so there's actually, and not that money is the most major and complicated and prioritized thing, and that it's not about just creating profit, and it's not just about creating revenue, but reflect on what you're speaking to, Lucian, about creating this, either experimental system of how we, create a value system that does reward everybody for their time and contribution, combined with actually creating a system that that utilizes this form of energy known as money to be able to create the highest caliber of support through the initiatives of what we decide are the most important, or create, whatever priorities of whatever we decide to shift through. And so I think within the catalyst of what's going on here, of all of these minds coming together, of all these hearts sharing their visions and their dreams, and then as you all, as kind of facilitators of being able to piece those things together like a puzzle, being able to create kind of the sounding board of where these directives move towards in the aspects of the business, because ultimately this is the business mindset of it is what will ultimately make this thing succeed or fail. And I think this is where, from a certain perspective, your expertise, within, a lot of the journey that has brought you into this very moment, combined with bringing the Savannah team together, bringing all of us together, really has the ability to shine in being able to polish all of the initiatives and all of the contributions made to this. And then within that singular focus that then disperses within the fractalization of it all. My contribution to this is now definitely moving more towards, really bringing the meta into the sound field. And what I mean by that is that, having been a practitioner of this field for so many years and being like really immersed in the community, seeing all the things that work, seeing all the things that failed, one of the biggest blocks for me through this whole process has been figuring out, okay, how do I strategize to bring this to more and more people, and essentially getting out of my own way, because my initial thing was like, no, I just want to be an artist, I just want to be a musician, I just want to keep serving. But then ultimately realizing, like, no, actually your purpose is much higher than just being a sound facilitator. Like, you have to really bring your hustle mentality, bring your business mindset into this, because if you don't, then the ability to like kind of proliferate all of it into a much more available opportunity for the practitioners who are just serving, like, one or two people, to the people who are doing massive group projects. So and so what I'm trying to get at to all of this is that as we have these conversations, as the game happens, creating the business aspects of it, and I know you know this, and I know a lot of other people know this too. My suggestion in throwing this out there is only more of a reiteration of it, less of a like, oh, this is like a new topic, but more so just the components of how the business aspects of it will come together are going to be crucial to the success of this being able to fully expand into something that can create value, as well as create enough interest in all of the people that they can be emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually invested in creating more of this, because we can all come together in this way, in all of the ways that we can. And of course, it's great to know that we can get paid out of it too, and pay for food, pay for our apartments, have families and live our lives the way that we like. And I know definitely on both sides of this spectrum, this is where it's the hardest part, because it's like, okay, on one hand, it totally makes sense. Yeah, we can do all these things to make revenue and generate profit and create value out of it. And then on the other hand, it's like, wait, actually, how do we do it? So,
Shane, the beautiful thing there with that invitation with the business aspect is to relate to it as, particularly as like founding players here, that as we think about the business model and the incentive engine that is based on abundance, not scarcity, and based on like, you know, really creating this value engine that we're not just doing it for our own projects. What we're actually modeling is like a whole new way of funding community efforts, that these projects aren't almost like traditional businesses, but they're like, you know, we're thinking about them being functionally DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and that they have their own funding model and like design model for how people get rewarded. And you know, success for us is that we create a viable alternative to starting a company that is specifically focused on creating value for the commons through the game. And that people don't need to make an either or, that they can choose to participate in the game one game a week. And that actually becomes part of something people do, is that they're creating value, they're contributing to the commons for 8 hours a week, and then they're doing their kind of otherworld activities. But, you know, more and more so we might find that people so love playing the game, and the game is so quantumly more effective than the current competition model, that more and more capital comes into the game, which means just more and more peoples will be then incentivized to be players.
Yeah, the business structures I had been working around, at least when I was, you know, contemplating like, okay, cool, you know, like what kind of business formality would I create through the structuring of like a sound healing kind of, you know, for profit, but ultimately for benefit, and for benefit for the planet, for benefit for all the people who are involved in it. It was a bit of it was half of a kind of hybrid version of a DAO combined, because thankfully through my journey I've gotten to interact with more people who are familiar with the structuring of DAOs, and really figuring out how to create these satellite programs, as well as the kind of like mother nexus that then begins to support the satellite programs, that then creates the reciprocation process of how, you know, the next satellite funds the next satellite, which feeds back into the mother, that feeds back into the next satellites, and so forth and so on. And so I would throw it out there when and if available. I'm more than willing to, as I've said in previous conversations, I'd be more than willing to come up to San Francisco and show you the stuff that I've been working on, because especially within the sound field, I've been able to identify specific markers within how to create enough revenue generation through all the topics that we've been talking about that can help create a circular fund that, one, in a certain respect, does need investors to kind of start it, and then it will basically self-regulate within about a year and a half.
Shane, let's do that. The more we can get these tight loop cycles, and the unified planet ultimately is going to get formed into a co-op, and like it's going to be fundamental to the success of that co-op that we find some early success stories. And the more we can help like do that together, you know, like that's key for this getting off the ground. So Dominic, are you still with us?
Looks like he left.
No, he just had to. He was just saying goodbye. Cool.
Add something just into this thread that you guys are talking about with the financial piece. It feels like you know, this is it's a nucleus of a new way of doing everything we're talking about. So I don't need to repeat that. And I think about what's that larger context of the city, San Francisco, and other cities that are looking at like donut economics and a new model of at the macro level, and then how this can actually be potentially a trim tab, a kind of an intervention point to say, here's this new model that can also model, can demonstrate to people what's possible. And maybe the food systems for next week, there can be some awareness of that, like what would it look like? Because it's a little bit of a different kind of question around food systems for a city than the sound healing. It's just, they're a little different. So I want to just name that there's a relationship between what we're creating here and kind of what donut economics as a model is. And there could be some interesting paying attention to the alignments there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally agree, Sherry. And I think if we can model almost like a donut economics at the community level, which is already its design. And donut economics is like a fractal design of like economic policy. So that's where like I invite us all to relate to the game as a way to experiment on the micro, the macro.
Mm-hmm.
And like think if donut economics we think is part of like shifting from like unbridled free market capitalism into a kind of more regenerative circular economy model, the game is actually a phenomenal place to say, hey, here's a new set of rules. This is how we play here, in such a way that we might just be doing what Bucky called the New World Game, where you don't change things by fighting the existing model to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So my personal view, which is based on 12 years of like studying what might make this happen, my personal view is nobody's going to create a new model by saying they're creating a new model. It's not going to look like that. It's not going to be like anyone that says, hey, we're creating a new economic system is going to get cut at their knees before they can get any, because it's so wickedly complicated. And so one of the beautiful things about a game is nobody thinks when you're saying, hey, we're doing a game, that we're actually attempting to model a new economic system.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the prayer here, is that this is a experiment of the macro in the micro.
Mm-hmm.
And so really invite everybody to relate in that way, and that this is like us bringing our dharma of our personal, like, this is what I'm bringing to the container in the service of the collective. And that's like really beautiful to have those experiences to co-create together in, when we really feel like our individual dharma has got the potential to shape. And if we relate to it in that way, and we have the kind of sacred nature of the container, that's how I personally relate to it, that this is sacred economics. And this is like returning the sacred to play, the kind of divine play, aspect. I think if we all relate to that as a culture, and we think, what is donut economics meets like Gestalt, Quaker cultural, like deep connection building, like re-communifying, what does that look like in a game format? And how do we all play our role, and like all play what is our piece in the garden, what is our music, is our instrument in the orchestra? If we can relate to this in that way in the coming week, I think that will be, it's got its own beautiful energy. And so for now, it's like, let's like Michelangelo, let's reveal the David in the game.
So Lucian, are you planning to next week do the points, and so you can play the game, or is it not ready yet to actually do the points for what you're contributing?
So what we wanted to do, we kicked off food into next week so that this week we could start to design some of the structures that we've been talking about, such as like one thing we want to do as an experiment is like, if everybody had like 1,000 stars and you could either keep them yourself or give them to others, like how would that play out? And like recognizing that, we're looking to establish a new culture, in that the more you, like this, the rule number 4, service, in giving we receive. And so like those kind of things is really the focus of this week. And we can continue to invite this game on the game, and maybe we do a meeting each day till Thursday, just where we will jam with, hey, we're thinking about this, what do you think? Get feedback for anybody that would be able to and like to contribute.
Okay. Does anybody have any data on what happened with the universal basic income experiment in Oakland? And because that's essentially a game and has some results already, I think, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, David, to really go deep on that, because one thing about the concept of stars is actually based on some of the premises of universal basic income, but instead of giving it to individuals, you're empowering a community, with a community being the 22 players. with 30,000, the equivalent of $30,000, and saying how that community distributes that based on contribution to the commons is a form of UBI, but it's a form of like highly empowered UBI, and it could work anywhere. You know, it could work in any community. That's the beautiful like thing about the game, is that if we design it in a way that you can distribute capital not to individuals, which I personally, my dad studied this. He did the world's largest study on this point, specifically applied to like how do you, he went around the world in his wheelchair in the 60s with the focus of studying vocational employment training for disabled people. And he was specifically looking at how you dignify the contribution of disabled people. And what he found is if you just were to give a handout to people, it destroys their dignity. And he had a motto: work builds, charity destroys, give them a chance, not charity. And so one of his key lessons to me was like, UBI is all about like, it's kind of handouts. Whereas if you financially empower a community with $30,000 a week, and that community self-organizes how to distribute that capital based on the contribution of those community members to the vision and dreams of that community, we're actually re-communitizing, which is fundamentally like we've had a systematic breakdown in communities intentionally since the Industrial Revolution. And so that's one of the reasons we've had a tragedy of the commons, and it's all connected. But this is it's essentially a parallel experiment, which I think is an idea whose time has come, to say that this is like community basic income rather than individual basic income.
I like the idea. I just was reflecting back on what I thought was some of the lessons from the UBI experiment, which was basically that I don't know if people saw it as handouts as much, or that it took their dignity away. What I saw, and I only looked at one article on it, was that it enabled people to actually, like you're saying, be in community, because they weren't spending so much time trying to earn revenue, having 2 or 3 jobs. Instead of having 2 or 3 jobs, they could actually be with their kids and do, plant a garden and things like that. So that's the little bit that I know from that idea.
Yeah, sorry, David. I don't want to. I'm actually a big fan of UBI. I just think there's ways of distributing the capital that will like have maximum positive effect on society. Like,
yeah, that's great.
Put it this way, I think it's fundamentally needed. If we don't have it, and we don't have more of our society, like basic needs like healthcare, education, food, etc., should be in the commons and be rewarded based on your contribution to the commons. Like that is part. UBI is not just income. It goes way beyond into all aspects of like, what is it to live in a civilized society?
Yeah, we need to go beyond the individualist model. So you can't just hand money out to people without changing the way that money circulates and the way that it's designed to generate value, because our modern economy is based on the generative power of money circulating. But the problem is that generative model ends up putting lots of money in the pockets of people like Jeff Bezos of the world, right? So the money stops somewhere, the musical chairs stop somewhere in the current game, and there needs to be a different design to that game of musical chairs, so that where the money stops is in the commons and not in the pocket of Jeff Bezos. And you can't do that by just giving money to individuals unless you're designing in the kinds of things Lucian's talking about.
Right, and all I was suggesting was that since that experiment is already, that game is already happening, that we learn from both how money was spent and how it was given away, but also the way that people are living differently because that exists. And to your point, Lucian, I think what you're trying to create, what you're suggesting we create, is absolutely true, and parts of it may have been somewhat created already, and we can learn from that and use that as a way to say we should do more of this, or do something like this, but in a different, better way, like the one you're describing.
Totally.
Because these are the benefits of having this security blanket of your basic needs being met as a human being, right?
Maybe, Sarah, one idea for a structure of the game would be if the meta council, because we broke the game design into essentially verticals and horizontals. Horizontals are called councils and verticals are called guilds. And so in terms of game design, like the meta council, which is kind of the storytelling, that kind of piece, the narrative, the principles, the oath, that go across the game is being led by this group that Sarah's leading, the meta council. And then there's vertical guilds. And so we could, for example, have a guild, actually it would be more of a council on like learning from UBI and incentive design for communities. And so we could look at that and how we structure that so that we're identifying where are the areas of innovation that the game is bringing, and we're creating team structures for that innovation and that thought to come through the collective intelligence of people that want to be brought together around that. So
yeah, there definitely should be a meta council that's looking at the economic incentives for building community, you know, because that's a deep fundamental issue. And there are people, I mean, right now the meta council really is more, I think more than just the narratives of the meta council, it's about the structures that help to sustain the game and that also help people to play the game effectively. You know, so coming up with ways to help us all shift truly to the next level of collaborative co-creation and designing the processes, just like we're talking about now, for really making the game work effectively and be self-propagating. But yeah, I think absolutely having a council is a good idea. And as I said in the chat, which not everybody may have seen, is that Corey Call and Erez Asher, who are two people on the Meta Council, have developed very concrete business structures for doing a lot of the things that are being discussed here. You know, they've both gone so far as they have incorporated, they have corporate structures set up, they have very specific, you know, models of how to create businesses that are structured by different kinds of economic incentives, where a certain proportion of the profits go back into the community, and there's a community foundation that determines how that money is used and that kind of thing. So I think it would be great to do a digital coffee for the Savannah House team and for anybody else who's interested in following up on this, and have Corey and Erez talk about their specific structures, which we've already done within the Meta Council, but of course the goal is to spread this out more. And I know they'd be happy to do it.
Well, let's and we can just, if everybody is okay with us sending some optional invitations for you to continue the touch points this week, we'd love to do that. And let's do that in one of our, thank you, Serena. Let's do that in one of our, maybe, should we continue to meet at 10 a.m. Each week, each day this week, just to continue, and the specific focus be more on the kind of meta, how do we learn from what we did last week, to one, propagate those projects, and two, propagate the game. So we'll continue to communicate on those. And don't feel pressure, you know, this is like, we want to be, at all times, we want to be respectful of, like, we value your time as your most precious resource. And so thank you for continuing to show up and let it be from a place of charm. Anyone else want to share before we wrap up today?
It sounds like you've done amazing work and a lot of study, Lucian, so I'm only trying to add value if it's helpful. I just had one other quick question maybe about the strategy that you're using. And it's kind of based on what Sarah was just saying about, I think it's one thing to think about what the economic models are, and I think you've thought about this already. I just want to be clear that if this is helpful. What I was trying to get at with the last kind of line of discussion was humans have different needs that are not economic at all. And that's what we should, in my mind, what we should be gearing our culture towards. You know, what you need love, you need support, you need to be able to create, you need to obviously be able to eat and have shelter. And those are the things that we need to have a community. We don't need money. We don't need the concept of economic at all. We do need the ability to feel like we're creating value in the world. And maybe we need the ability to exchange value, but really all I need is to eat and sleep and feel loved, right? So my point is that maybe you've studied all the psychology of community already. I haven't studied it a lot, but there's a lady out of Stanford who has a really good book on it called, I don't know, I can think about it and add the link tomorrow. It's like Design Yourself, or Live with Design, or Design Your Life, or something like that. But it redesigns the Maslow's hierarchy of needs into a different order that I think is more contemporary and makes more sense.
No, beautiful, David. I I've been in the trenches of community design, but the one thing I've learned is it's about collective intelligence. And so we're really inviting that field in. And, you know, if we relate to Maslow's hierarchy, something I've always shared is Maslow got it wrong in that he left out community on Maslow's hierarchy. There is like the from a basic needs perspective. But one thing, if you see the layers where you've got basic needs and safety, and you're going all the way up to self-actualization, and the one people didn't talk about, which Maslow talked about on his deathbed, which is transcendence. As we think about that pyramid, actually then going transcendence out that way, at each level on that pyramid is actually your need for community fundamentally shifts. And it's a great frame for understanding the polarization of politics in America. Because when you recognize that community is actually the backbone, it's the pillar of the pyramid, and it shifts at every level. So if you're on a self-actualization level, your need for community is fundamentally different than if you're on a safety basic needs level. And those two groups of people are like completely different, and they other each other consistently. And it's one of the biggest problems we have in our society. And so if we think about like, what is our objective here, is to recognize that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is actually a community conveyor belt. And that the only way we're going to get into the world we dream of, that we think can win for all, is if we inverse the pyramid. Is if we recognize that what we're creating is starting those with the like at the basic needs, like the smallest part of society. Ultimately, we're trying to eradicate poverty, but like as we go up, the majority of people are dealing with transcendence, and then the next majority of people are dealing with self-actualization, and so on and so forth. That's a model for like flipping Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a strategy for like new economic design. But it's like it's recognizing the role community plays through those levels, is that like we're going to feel in communion with others at the same level of Maslow's hierarchy, more so than others. And so it's like kind of applying spiral dynamics to Maslow's hierarchy.
Cool. That's cool. Thank you.
I love that, David. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually about to speak, not speak to that, but I was going to ask about that too, because I'd be curious how Maslow's pyramid applies to the aspects of the evolution of consciousness in not only the individual, but also from the integral spiral dynamic perspective. Because I think being able to kind of address what David was saying in the sense that, like, you know, humans all have different needs, right? In certain dynamics, like, you know, some of us do need money, some of us do need love, maybe some of us don't, you know, like, I mean, I still have yet to meet one. But being able to use kind of both aspects of how our needs are met combined with our evolution of consciousness is really going to dictate our ability to address the wider field of, you know, just every single person. Because there's definitely, like, even myself as an example, I'm incredibly pragmatic in that, like, I don't need a lot to live in my life, but if you give me $1 million, I could do a lot with it, you know, like, and so from a certain perspective, I don't need to go there, but I certainly, given the options, if I had all the resources and availability and support, I could totally go that way too, you know, to be able to create more structure that $1 million could do for me, that then spreads out to how I could use that to support other people as well. So it's like, you know, being able to address kind of the finer points of how this synergistic process goes between the inverse of the pyramid as you get to the top, and then it flips, you know, and then how that works within the evolution of consciousness, I think is really, really important. And being able to create an easy way for people to understand those concepts of being able to identify, like, not only where are you on your pyramid, but then also where are you on your spiral dynamic, because of, you know, are you in the red, are you purple, are you, you know, turquoise, and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, or are you operating from yellow or orange, and then even realistically, wherever you are operating from, where do you want to go? Because that's ultimately going to play more into your hierarchy of how you see your dynamic, like working with other people at their level of consciousness and so forth and so on.
Well, ultimately, I think that is the fractal of the infinite game, is that the game becomes almost like a biblical next chapter. And that like what I'm getting at here is that imagine if you could game the way people could evolve their consciousness in community, and like actually incentivize that spiraling upwards. I could really geek out here, and I'm not going to.
Be honest,
it's
I mean,
really
that's
fun topics. So
I think that's another interesting topic to discuss as well, because of, I think, engaging people on their almost kind of like what precedes the other aspects, in the sense that are your desires and needs within the Maslow hierarchy, do they supersede the aspects of your evolution of consciousness, or is it the other way around? And so, engaging people's desires, which, I mean, realistically, from, at least from what I've seen of my personal journey, there are a lot of people who want to evolve their consciousness, but don't, one, have the tools, two, have fear, three, operate in scarcity, and then four, like there's just so much involved with it. And let's just say I'm not surprised that people don't want to heal, based off of the structures that we've, the societies and the programs and the institutions and the systemic programs that have like led us to be who we are. And being able to properly engage them in such a way that it doesn't come off as woo-woo. It's not just a bunch of like conspiracy theory buffs that are, just needing to get ironed out and all this kind of stuff. Being able to properly engage that in such a way that it is addressing the hierarchy of scales for Maslow, combined with being able to temper the aspects of evolution in terms of our consciousness, is I've been at it 10 years and I'm still on the fence. So, and I know there are more people that have been doing it for a much, much longer time, not only in communal groups, but also from the individual. And it's definitely, like, do we throw you in a breathwork program? Do we throw you in a room full of kittens and puppies, and you have your, explosion of consciousness? So it's like, it's so wide and diverse in its application. So, being able to, I think, work between the two realms, between the hierarchies of our needs combined with our hierarchy of our consciousness, is incredibly crucial for being able to reach much, like, many more people. So
yeah, I often think like spirit and matter is like a DNA double helix that will rise together. So it's like, how do we think about those two? This is these two realms, that hold hands as they sort of dance and spirals. But Shane, I'm so happy you're on the team. Thank you.
I want to share something quickly. Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay, so I missed some of what you were saying. However, it sounds like overall, and I think about this a lot, like, how do we reach the greatest number of people that may be excited and have eyes on us, knowing that more is going to come out from what we're offering. So we get more buy-in from a larger number of people, and that keeps escalating. Yes? So when I think about that, I think about comedians, and I really see comedians as angels on our earth, because comedians have the ability, as we all know, to help us look at these complex and difficult parts of our lives and how we do things and what we decide to do and not do, and laugh at it and bring it down to a very simple level and not make it so not so serious, but maybe make it fun. with saying that, I think about funders or people that want to invest, and what they want usually is they want a return on their money. And they want to see something that is already has buy-in on a large level in our culture. Yes? So with that said, you know, what have we brainstormed on and what is pretty simple and that is similar to something that's already has a large buy-in on a very simple, fun level, maybe adding some fun to it, that investor could see, oh yes, this application has been a huge success, and now we're just taking it and we're you know, using sound. And so I guess that's some thoughts I had around that. What do you think?
I mean, I think I think the thing that hasn't been really tested yet is, rather than this like age of the lone wolf and like entrepreneur with an individual organization, that we start testing something different, which is a human hive, and that you're investing in the collective and you're actually spreading your risk. And so structuring ways to bring money in and like say like, okay, we're going to give across the fund that's going to fund all these community projects, we're going to give a 7% return, and we're going to get that backed by these billionaires that will go and say like, these kind of projects needs to happen. So that we're not picking individual winners and picking like, we're going, you know, the current venture model is so farcical. It's like, if you were to design it, you would be like,
I know.
You would be designing specifically to make the rich richer, and that's actually just what happened. But it's if we were to redesign how people create value for the collective, part of it wouldn't be you making a specific investment in one community, but you spreading the risk across. And so that's part of like, there's a lot that needs to go into thinking of like, how do we create an incentive engine for people to fund experiments within the game so that they're spreading their risk across a lot of different projects.
Right, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that's why this is like, it's pretty wickedly complex, but it's a beautiful challenge for a collective intelligence to be applied to, which is like, if all bets are off right now, if like we're in Corona times and like we have infinite possibilities around where humanity can evolve to in the next 10 years, let's be on the team that shoots for the sidelines, that doesn't just look to tweak the current system, but is like, let's do wholesale system redesign in a hope that like we're going to be successful at some of them that will shape everything else. And so that's kind of like the, you know, the real invitation for co-creation here is like, when we're going out to get funding for Shane's robotic arm playing bowl that could go into every school in California, partnered with Gavin Newsom and like state of California as an experiment. That model is part of a diversified portfolio that we're asking funders to put capital into. And like that whole design needs to start like, how do we run experiments that we can start to get the seed funding it needs, and such a point that we can move more and more capital in. And so this is part of the project that we're designing, is like, essentially not how do we move millions, it's how do we move trillions of dollars into the planetary commons within as fast as possible.
And I agree, and I know that that's the direction you want to go in, and I support that. And I didn't mention that. I was just thinking, what would be not just a single thing that we would do, but just something that would start creating some buzz around getting attention to what we are doing. But we don't, you know, it's just an idea.
Well, absolutely, and I encourage you to like be co-create this, like anything where, like, for example, Leo and Andrea, Andrea, I think, are you still with us here?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm still here.
Leo has said, he and I spoke on Friday night, he said he's personally willing to fund the Matrix projects, this research project, Andrea's amazingly said that she can lead this first, like, first effort of it. And so we
Yeah, because it seems like it's part of the Sound Institute. Because when we looked at everything, I was like, okay, where is it at on the uploads? But I was like, I think it's part of the Sound Institute.
That's what we put it as.
Okay.
The Matrix Project Omaha is the first project of this like Sound Institute. And
Yeah, because it's all the benefits and everything that it's like when you're looking at hospitals, healthcare systems, anything, they're looking at like, okay, why am I going to choose this versus this? So it's like the beneficial model, but then also what the challenges are as well, because we know that there's both sides. But yeah, I'm doing some research on that and getting back to you guys on that.
Thank you. And so that like model of an action in the here and now of like Leo said he came into the week not knowing what would happen, discovered these 22 souls of like deep shared purpose and passion, and he was like wanting this project to be done, just so happened to enter a breakout group, and Andrea, who has like all of the skills to like go and make it happen, was like sat waiting. So it's like these kind of things, like how do we propagate in the micro whilst keeping an eye on like what we're collectively co-creating here is at least has the possibility to be something bigger, but it's only going to be bigger by being structurally coherent in the micro.
And the other piece I want to jump in with is that, Don, I hear what you're saying about funders want to fund projects, but that's part of the problem. And if you look at the way people fund businesses, they fund people, right? What investors look for when they fund a business is they look to see who's on the management team, and the idea may change, right? With startups, especially tech startups, people go through many ideas before they actually may hit on an idea that they fund. And if we really want to fund the creation of the commons, we have to fund people. And people have to be funded not in a blind way, right? Like it's not just that anybody gets money. There have to be specific incentives, and there needs to be markers of quality, in essence, about the groups that are coming together. And part of that marker of the quality is the quality of the container, which is why this conversation and this debriefing is so important from my perspective, right? Because if we create a strong container, what's going to happen is it's going to elicit the collective intelligence of many people whose intelligence has never been tapped before in that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of the proof of it is that projects will get generated, if the groups that are brought together are diverse enough and cut across enough communities, then you'll start to see projects being successful that weren't successful before, even with the same concept, because you're also building the community relationships across difference that needs to happen to actually make things happen through the game itself, right? That's my personal little obsession as an anthropologist and social scientist, right? Is you have to build those cross-cutting fibers. And so as the game propagates, the game itself is it's like the Gaia hypothesis, right? The game itself is creating the community conditions that allow the projects to succeed.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be some early successes in projects, but we also have to craft a narrative that makes people understand why they have to invest in people. And that's where universal basic income, also has that conversation has some relevance here, because that's what many people talking about universal basic income are talking about. Essentially, they're talking about investing in people, and here what we're talking about is investing in communities that are, and community building, right, through a very specific process.
Yes, thank you. I agree. Thank you both, Lucian and Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Danielle or Bobby, do you anything you want to share before we, if anyone else, I don't know, Emil or Shane, or anyone would like to think of a closing sound that we could leave today with, that would be delightful.
Laughing?
Laughing, yeah. But
Laughing.
Danielle and Bobby, anything you want to share?
I'll jump in just really quickly. Sorry, I've been in listening mode because I've had something else that I had to do at this time. But it feels like we're making really good concrete progress, and that's what I always like to see. I'm just about to jump on a call that will potentially relate to this in terms of a structure. It's around a delivery mechanism for a community-based solution, and we're looking at financial mechanisms for that. So once I've done some further digging around, I might make suggestions for what we could be thinking about in terms of, I know this will require something quite unique, but I think that there are financial mechanisms around, like potentially something like a community development fund, for example, and how that looks. It could be something like a donor advised fund. And my gut is it's going to take one or two people that really see this, that have the capacity to invest. And that could be in terms of, venture philanthropy or whatever, to kick this off, and potentially even be the foundational basis for funding of it, because that's what it's going to take. But yeah, I've got lots of ideas. I just want to say I honor what's going on, and I'm loving it, and it's really nourishing me. So thank you all.
Thank you, Bobby.
Bobby, thank you. Would love all of those things. Like, great for us to dive in together and get. Part of the thinking is that we could form a Swiss Genossenschaft, a Swiss co-op, as a way to then financially enable communities through that structure. So would love to geek out with you.
Yeah, so that would be interesting too. Yeah, all the things. Mahalo.
Thank you, Bobby.
Bye.
Danielle?
Oh, hi, thank you. I'm actually really filled with a lot of emotion, just so much gratitude and inspiration of everything that's coming together, and that it's really something that I've trying to keep it together here, that I have been calling in for a really long time. And so I haven't chimed in to say anything, because I just didn't want the waterworks to come in while I was trying to express something. I'm not, so I'm a little overwhelmed, but I'm also very inspired. And one of the things, I actually started my sound healing career in San Francisco. I live in Atlanta now. And one of the things that I've started here was I started to some of the points that you're all talking about, of a larger ecosystem and core values and core language. I created a certification program with, in thinking about this this concept of ecosystem, and to create a core language and to create these core values, so that sound practitioners are supporting each other and lifting each other up in the industry. But then at the graduation, there's a really big fundraiser that we do, where the idea is to tap into the love and the pride of our city here in Atlanta, and gather other like-minded practitioners in health and wellness who want to come together and also share their gifts at the fundraiser. And all of ticket sales go towards creating job opportunities for sound practitioners in nonprofit organizations. And so there are a lot of things that you've left me with to look up. Donut economics, the Gestalt, that I feel that this other way of thinking is, I don't really have all of the words for it, but I feel like part of what I've been able to co-create with my community here in Atlanta, my thoughts are going into 100 different directions. So I think I'm just going to stop there, but I'm just really so appreciative. Not sure how to just contain all the things that I'm thinking to make it relevant to this conversation. But thank you. And I look forward to connecting on future calls.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for setting the closing tone of today so beautifully. Really appreciate you, and ultimately, you know, community solutions need to be local solutions. So thank you for reminding us of that piece of the way this is going to propagate is through local communities, and that like Atlanta fundraiser being kind of part of the effort here. So thank you so much. Anything you guys want to close with before laughing?
Just massive amounts of gratitude and
look at Joshua just chilling here, just like
I'm taking it all in. With mass amounts of just like heartfelt gratitude and like that emotion that's shared, I feel as well, and that's the sense of community that it brings to me is like that collective. But it's like that. It's that sense of that brings me the sense of community. Is this sharing and encouragement in taking these next steps, and everything I've heard in the last 2 hours really just brings home, I think, what we've been sensing already, the framework, and continuing to let this container create itself, really. All the pieces are right there. We're just refining. It's another week of refinement. So I feel grateful for that.
We're playing a living prayer. The new form of prayer is play, maybe. Sounds good to me as a good Catholic boy.
We ready for a meal here?
Just one Brian and Marnie, any closing words?
Nothing particular for me, just expressing, I think Joshua nailed it, just like gratitude and a patient listening and embracing of the container creating itself and being attuned to that and really honoring everyone that's been showing up and bringing their voice, bringing their passion to help us do that, like deep gratitude and excitement for what's to come.
Let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah. 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. Sherry likes the 10 a.m., but like we kind of prefer 11.
People, Bobby said 11 works better for her. I didn't see anybody else saying anything in the chat.
How about you, Sarah?
10 works better for me. If I may be up at my Akamas tomorrow and Wednesday, so it might not make any difference then.
I might come and see you, Sarah.
We'll just
Oh, cool. Oh, all right.
Seriously.
Cool. So I just need to confirm with David, but I may be up there. So tomorrow and Wednesday, actually either time would be okay. Thursday, I'm more constrained. I have to check and see. But you know, what you might want to do is to do it, if it's not too confusing, maybe do it 11 a.m. tomorrow, do it 10 a.m. Wednesday, 11 a.m. Thursday, something like that, to alternate it so that those for whom it's. Although I think 11 a.m. is a bit late for a meal, right? Does that make? Or no, I guess 10 a.m. is early for you.
No, I started at 7 a.m. today.
Right. 10 a.m. is early for you. So Emil would appreciate 11 a.m. So maybe alternate, you know, in that way.
It was all fine, honestly. It is early, but it's cool. I got an early start on my day. So
yeah.
I'm with the collective on it and just, acknowledging that.
Cool.
Then I say we do 11 tomorrow, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds
Perfect.
great.
Let's do that. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Marnie. Anything you want to?
Yeah, I would love to, like, all of it's been really fascinating thinking more about incentive models and what incentivize you guys to be part of this, and then what will incentivize you to be part of it in the future and others. And there's some, like, digging into Maslow's hierarchy of needs is super. It's an awesome way to be rethinking it, tipping it up, and I think there's going to be some really just amazing stuff come out of our recalibration on what we just experienced.
Ready?
Money's gonna send a survey around.
Oh yes.
We'll send it to you, Sarah, first to get feedback, and then we'll get that survey round, and then that might inform the conversations as we go through the week as well. that will inform the conversations for sure. So, Emil, do you want to close us off?
Yeah, I would love to do something fun and liberating. Just take a short few minutes. Everyone, and I really liked Dawn's suggestion of laughter. It's a large part of what I integrate into the sound work I do with people one-on-one and in groups. So just take a few deep breaths into your belly to start. Let out, sigh. There, you can mute yourself. Yeah, great. So I'm going to let out various laughter sounds and just repeat to the best of your ability. And I'm also going to add some movement along with it. So I'll go and then you go. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Good. Ho 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 ho. Hee 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 hee. Hee 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 hee. Hee. And put your arms up and just shake them a bit. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. And then hands on the belly, do a ho ho ho. Ho 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 ho. And a deep sigh, inhale deep. One more time. And just shake your spine around, roll in circles, some shoulder movements, head rolls, breathing deeply still. Find your stillness, find your center, root down into the earth and up into the sky. Integrating everything we've connected to, knowing that much has been planted and more is blossoming, having huge gratitude for ourselves and every single person that has been involved, is involved now, and will be involved. Accepting and knowing that play and laughter is prayer and honoring that type of prayer so, so deeply. Do a little bow to ourselves and each other. Until the next now.
So beautiful. Thank you, Emil. Until the next now. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Sarah, as well, for your wisdom and your incredible partnership on this. Oh, we've lost Sarah, so.
Aloha.
See you tomorrow.
That's soon.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Andrea.
Of course.